Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on
For too long.
yes, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on
For too long.
and we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear somebody poisoning our waters, and it's gone on?
For too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
For too long.
I tell you, it's gone on.
For too long.
Somebody's poisoning our waters, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Have you heard somebody wants to build that wall now, and it's gone on?
For too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
For too long.
I tell you, it's gone on.
For too long.
Somebody wants to build that wall, y'all, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Whoa, somebody's imprisoning children, and it's gone on.
For too long.
I tell you, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, somebody's imprisoning children, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's suppressing our votes now, and it's gone on.
For too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, somebody's suppressing our votes now, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's separating our families, and it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, somebody's separating our families, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's foreclosing our homes now, and it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, somebody's foreclosing our homes now, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's raising our rents now, and it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, it's gone on.
For too long.
Oh, somebody's raising our rents now, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's hurting our neighbors, and it's gone on.
For too long.
Yes, it's gone on.
For too long.
I tell you, it's gone on far too long. Oh, somebody's hurting our neighbors, and it's gone on.
For too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. We won't be silent. And we won't be silent anymore. That's why we're here now. And we won't be silent anymore.
My name is Reverend Shauna Foster, and and I am on the National Steering Committee of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
Yes.
I'm Pastor Terrence Hughes, President of the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, and also a strong supporter of the Poor People's Campaign.
In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. started the original Poor People's Campaign, and he was killed before the campaign took off. Many people believe it is because of this cause that we are here for today, which is to unite the poor. And so we are honored to carry on this work, this unsettling work, which should shock the nation into doing the right thing. And so we are going to enter into a spirit of prayer by doing a litany today. We are going to lead with a scripture that comes from many different spiritual traditions, and we want you to respond with, "We are a new and unsettling force." We are a new and unsettling force. And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
Let's say it all together. We are a new and unsettling force, and we are powerful.
As I get ready to read this litany, know that we are the voice of the voiceless. Those folks who cannot make it even to these steps, who are not welcomed in the doors, who are not welcomed in other places. We are the voice of the people, of the poor people. We are all one step away, one incident, one catastrophe away from a reality that a lot of our brothers and sisters live in, that Reverend Martin Dr. King fought and died for it in the end. And the litany goes, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. prophetically described 50 years ago, there are millions of poor people in this country who have very little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life.
We are a new and unsettling force, and we are powerful.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, and to set liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Luke 4:18-19.
We are a new and unsettling force, and we are powerful.
Oh God, oh energy of God, please engage me in your service. Hare Krishna Manta.
We are a new and unsettling force, and we are powerful.
Justice, justice shall you pursue. Deuteronomy 16:20.
We are a new and unsettling force, and we are powerful.
The believers, both men and women, are in charge and responsible for one another. They all enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong. Quran 9:71.
We are a new and unsettling force, and we are powerful.
If you are generous with the hungry and start giving yourselves to the down and out, your lives will begin to glow in the darkness. Your shadowed lives will be bathed in sunlight. You will be like a well-watered garden, a gurgling spirit that never runs dry. You'll use the old rubble of past lives to build anew. Rebuild the foundations from out of your past. You'll be known as those who can fix anything. Restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate. Make the community livable again. Isaiah 58.
We are a new and unsettling force,
and we are powerful.
Hi everyone. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to say a special thank you to all our speakers that are going to speak today. They're all activists in the community fighting for social justice and making the world a better place. My name is Steve Mendoza, and I am, like many of you, an activist in the community, trying to do something about the injustice that I see in the world around me. I'm a member of various organizations here locally, and I am with the Movement for a People's Party specifically. I will never run for an elected office. I just want to see systemic changes that reflect the world that I want to live in. When I reached out this past week to the National Poor People's Campaign to help get something started here in Denver, I didn't expect to plan an event 4 or 5 days later, but here we are in less than a week. So the reason we were able to put it together was because of Jim, John, and Beth, who are here organizing, and so I'm glad we got it done. I'm really happy to see unity around this movement because unity is what we need to bring about systemic change. So I'll just say a couple of words about Dr. Martin Luther King and how I see this Poor People's Campaign as a continuation of what King started 50 years ago. Dr. King once said, "The evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and the evils of racism." He saw these issues as being interrelated, and I completely agree. Stokely Carmichael also said, "Capitalism goes hand in hand with racism and economic exploitation." And again, I completely agree. Poverty is inherent in capitalism, and therefore capitalism has got to go. But we won't be able to change our economic system within a corrupt political system. So in the meantime, we must fight for what Dr. King referred to as the 3 evils of society. So the demands of the Poor People's Campaign are in a way an attempt to correct the failings of an economic system that puts profits over the needs of the people. Profits for the few over the needs of the people. The Poor People's Campaign is fighting against systemic racism. Right now, black wealth being something like 7 cents for every dollar of white wealth is not an economic system that is equitable. We cannot move forward as if the history of this country didn't happen. Economic oppression by a capitalist system that has primarily affected black and brown people cannot be overcome simply by declaring oneself to be anti-racist. We must take into account the racial exclusion in economic mobility that has existed for centuries. In regards to poverty and inequality, we want a guaranteed income for all, as Dr. King proposed 50 years ago. We want a federal job guarantee and an economic bill of rights that ensures that all people have their basic needs met. We can have clean water, we can house all the homeless, and we can provide health care for everyone. These are fundamental human rights. Now, people will say, we can't afford all that. And when they say something like that, just respond with, well, we may just have to pull back on the $700 billion we're spending in 2018 on the military, or the $719 billion we're going to spend in 2019. Tax the rich, exactly. Regarding the war economy and militarism, we're going to have a couple of vets up here talking about it, but we stand firmly against imperialism and empire. Regarding ecological devastation, we're going to have someone talk about that as well. And this is one of the most pressing issues we face as human species. We're also shifting the moral narrative and asking the question, what type of society do we want to live in? So, in my view, based on all the evidence that I've seen in this political system, we need to build an independent movement that bases itself on the needs of the poor and the working class. We can only achieve it if we all work together. So please fill out a pledge card today and stay involved. Thank you.
I hope you'll all bear with me. The one thing that I failed to do in the last few days trying to pull this together was write my own remarks. My name is Jim Norland. I'm an activist here in the community, and by trade, I'm a handyman, and I am just a dude. And I'll get to the reason I'm talking about that here in a minute. I haven't been to college. I screwed off so much in high school that instead of a diploma, I've got a GED. The reason that I'm bringing that up is that I am just a regular person. And that is exactly what we need in this movement. For a long time, I felt like I wanted to get involved. I wanted to create change in the world. And for a long time, I sat back going, well, who am I? I don't know how to do that. And at one point, I just started jumping in and doing it. And I'm bringing that up again because I want everyone here to think about just jumping in and doing it. That's better. We're here today to build community. We're here today to grow this movement. We're here to stand together. We're here to tell the folks that work in here that they need to listen to us. We do that by standing together. At this point in this movement, there are thousands of people across the country involved. Last May, John, one of our other organizers here, and myself were in Washington, D.C. just last month. And John's going to talk a little bit more about that. Yeah. We're here to stand together and to grow this movement. And we're here to invite all of you to join us. After this rally, the organizers will be hanging out for a little bit, cleaning up, that kind of thing. Please feel free to come. Connect with us. Ask us how you can get involved. We've got contact information for both the national organization, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and contact information for us here in Colorado, who are growing this into something more. This has been going on for the last 40 days. Every Monday across this country, there have been nonviolent direct actions. There's been civil disobedience going on. And we're going to be starting that here. And we're going to need people involved. We want all of you involved with us. Connect with us after this rally. We'll tell you how to keep in touch, how to get involved. We're at the end of phase 1. Phase 2 is kicking up here within the next few weeks, and we will be getting that information out to anybody and everybody that wants to get involved in this. And I think that's all I have to blather on about. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all for being here. I want to take a quick moment to thank, so Jim is my husband. My name is Beth Leba. It's a little bit of a family affair here today. I want to thank my brother Jonathan Leba, who provided his time and sound equipment for us today. As I said, my name is Beth Leba. I was born here in Denver and grew up in the North Side. I rarely take the mic at events that I organize, other than to MC, because I believe strongly in building the platform and passing the mic. I have been organizing 1 Billion Rising here in Denver for the last 6 years, which is a global movement to end violence against women. And I've also been lending support and have shown up for a variety of movements and actions here in our beautiful city. Today, I share a little bit of my truth, for I too am affected by the systemic ills that we are here to fight against. I am mixed race, Chicana and white. I am bisexual and I am disabled. And I am and always have been poor. Currently, I am only able to live in the neighborhood that I grew up in because we found kind landlords who care more about renting to good people than charging the astronomical rents that they could in this market. I have watched with rage and grief as my friends and neighbors have been pushed out of the North Side due to gentrification and the stagnation of wages as the cost of living has risen exponentially. I have been on both Medicaid and food stamps at various points of struggle in my life. I am still playing the game of survival like the vast majority of us. I have a decent job and health insurance, but I don't go to the doctor because I can't afford my deductible. That's just a tiny snapshot of the realities of my life. But in this moment, more than anything, I want to acknowledge our collective rage and grief. To hold space for our lament. Like so many of you, I am enraged that families at our border are being torn apart. I have to fight the urge every day. I just want to get in my car and go and do something, anything, because I am a mother and I can't even. All children are our children. And there is no justification for this policy. We don't do grief very well in our culture. And instead of a moment of silence, and this is going to feel weird because we don't do it often enough, I'm going to invite us into the fully embodied expression of our grief. So whatever that looks like for you, if you need to scream, if you need to wail, and maybe for you it is silence, and that's okay. But I invite you to just stand where you are and get centered and feel the ground beneath your feet. And take a deep breath together. And as you exhale, please just let it out. I know that we feel the pain of those children, and we know that the trauma is lifelong. I know that all of our hearts are breaking, and thank you for being here today, because we have to move forward together so that we can change these realities that are holding us all down. We do have the power. Now please turn to your neighbor and tell them you love them.
Thanks, Beth, for those moving remarks. It's great to see everybody out there today. Thank you for coming out to the Colorado Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Can you say that with me? Colorado Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. One more time, Colorado Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Thank you. My name is John Stout. I'm with Free Speech TV. I invite you to tune into Free Speech TV's coverage of the Poor People's Campaign. You can see that at Dish Network, DirecTV, Roku, Apple TV, streaming on freespeech.org. And we are live streaming this rally today at Free Speech TV's Facebook page. So please check us out. You can watch it after you get home as well. Use that to get the word out about this movement right here in our state. So 6 weeks ago, at the start of a 40-day season of nonviolent moral action, I flew to DC to stand with the poor, the sick, and the dispossessed, to stand with faith leaders and with those who profess no faith other than a moral commitment to justice for all. Once there, moved by the stories I heard, by the songs being sung, and by the powerful solidarity that I felt rising in this burgeoning movement, by this new and unsettling force, I made the personal choice of placing my body on the line to confront this nation's distorted moral narrative. I was proud to get arrested that day with Reverends William Barber and Liz Theo Harris, and with 140 other foot soldiers in the nonviolent army of the poor. This Wednesday, in 2 days, I will be returning to DC, figuratively retracing the steps of Denver's great civil rights leader, Jorge Gonzalez, who led a caravan of over 1,000 Chicanos, Native Americans, and poor people to the Poor People Campaign 50 years ago. In DC, on this Saturday, June the 23rd, I will gather, sing, and march with thousands around the country as part of the campaign's mass mobilization on the site of the original Resurrection City. If I am called to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience once again, it will be reassuring to know that a crowd stands with me in Denver. There is a chant that I want to hear in my head that day, all the way from Denver to DC. Will you join me? When I say forward together, you say not one step back. Forward together!
Not one step back!
Forward together!
Not one step back!
Forward together!
Not one step back!
All right, I can hear that. Thank you. So as Reverend Barber said that first week in DC, if you want folks to come together to build a movement, you'd better be able to share a clear and common purpose. After traveling the country for many months on a listening tour through many impacted communities, the Poor People's Campaign drafted a clear set of demands. The full list can be found at poorpeoplescampaign.org, but we're going to share a few of those demands with you today. I'm going to start by sharing some of the demands that are related to our democracy and voter suppression. We demand the immediate full restoration and expansion of the Voting Rights Act, an end to racist gerrymandering and redistricting, the implementation of automatic registration to vote at the age of 18, early voting in every state, and same-day registration. We demand a clear and just immigration system that strengthens our democracy through the broad participation of everyone in this country and presents a clear path to citizenship. We demand that First Nations, Native Americans, and Alaskan Native people retain their tribal recognition as nations, not races, to make some substantive claims to their sovereignty. We'll be sharing more of the demands throughout the day, but one more time, forward together! Forward together! Forward together!
I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge that right now we're standing on stolen land. Many of us, our ancestors, came over here, said they discovered the place, and systematically moved west, attempting to destroy the folks that originally lived here. At one point in time, for many of us, our ancestors were either conquerors or immigrants. I know I have both in my background. For us to acknowledge that, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that for many of us, our ancestors brought human beings from another place to this land as property. If we can begin to acknowledge that, we can begin to create space where we can heal. And when we start to heal, it becomes easier for us to stand together.
I want to thank John for sharing his stories about being part of the Poor People's Campaign means being part of being arrested. Because as our nation of laws, those laws move further away from a moral center. If you are a moral person, you are getting arrested in this country today. I've been arrested 3 or 4 times for the Poor People's Campaign so far, and I have the privilege to be able to do that, and so I call upon every person who is privileged in some way to participate in the civil disobedience, nonviolent revolution of the Poor People's Campaign. Now, I come from an organization called About Face Veterans Against the War. And people ask, what does it mean to be a veteran against the war? Well, let me tell you about what is happening. See if you can see some of these things that I'm talking about in society today. And if you recognize them, say shame. That instead of welcoming families seeking asylum, we take their rosaries and we take their children. Shame. Instead of forbidding guns on school campuses, we tell the teachers they should have guns too. Shame. Instead of anti-poverty programs, we over-police communities. Shame. Instead of relieving student debt, we build more prisons. Shame. Instead of having clean water, we poison it with oil. Shame. Instead of healing people, we deny healthcare coverage. Shame. Instead of building homes, we build spikes and enact camping bans. Shame. Instead of engaging with other nations through diplomacy, we wage the longest war in the history of the United States. Shame. All of this in the name of law and order and freedom. Do we create chaos and chain ourselves with fear? And I have to ask you, why?
Fascism.
Violent solutions to societal challenges is the definition of militarism. And that is what we at About Face, Veterans Against the War, have been fighting against. We are tired of seeing society become militarized, in which the vulnerable are crushed because somehow power is always good. It is by no accident that we are always told that violence is cheap, because it justifies the powers that be. They say it costs too much money to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and house the homeless. As a Starbucks CEO who is considering a political run recently said, how are you going to pay for all of this? But all I see is good money wasted. This year, the United States will spend over $1 trillion on a security budget alone. It costs money to steal children from their families. It costs money to give teachers guns. It costs money to over-police communities. It costs money to build prisons. It costs money to have a healthcare system based on an emergency room. It costs money to build pipelines over water. And it costs money to clean up those oil spills. It costs money to kick out the homeless. And it costs money to give water rights to Nestle while Flint still does not have clean water. Somehow our society can find so much money to burn against violence, and violence for our children, for violence for our planet, and violence against the poor. If you ever believe that violence is cheap, that violence is the easiest solution, then you have lost your soul. We have lost our morality, and we have strayed too far from any sort of God of peace, of justice, of love. It is time for us to turn this around. It seems like apathy is cheap, but it costs a lot for people to sit at home and do nothing, or to accept this seduction of cynicism. We have to arise as one, as part of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Because it is our destiny to unite together against this systemic violence. To deny this future is to perish alone in our homes, constantly watching the next installment of terrible news to see if this news actually affects me too. We cannot continue to export our violence abroad and answer, or to give it as a cheap answer to the poor here. The Poor People's Campaign is in 39 states, in which we, the poor and dispossessed, are rising up for ourselves. And it is time for you to join us from all walks of life to say that violence is not cheap. Violence is not the answer, and that we all must come together for these programs of social uplift. To fulfill the dream, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, we rise up and say, give families the freedom to be together at the border. Do not tear them apart. Give the citizens of Flint their clean water instead of giving it to Nestle. Give teachers their full budget so that they can teach and do not give them guns. Give money to poor communities instead of giving it for more police. Give students debt relief instead of building more prisons. Give Native American reservations clean water, air, and land instead of building more pipelines and more nuclear waste dump sites. Give the prisoner their freedom and end money bail. Give people preventative health care instead of letting them die in our emergency rooms. Give the homeless a place to live instead of a stupid camping ban. To give people a world of diplomacy of peace instead of endless war. This is what it means to be part of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Say it with me. Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker we have coming up is Tyrone Newsom. Come on down.
Hello. First, I would like to give a little background on myself. I am a veteran. I spent 3 years living on the streets and in what passes for a shelter. And I currently live in Elyria, Swansea, which I'm sure most of you know is the most polluted neighborhood in North America. But continuing on, I would also like to clarify that when I share my stories and I share these stories, I'm not sharing to focus on my experiences, but to focus on what is the experience of hundreds of thousands and millions of Americans. And I would like to remind us that as we stand in front of this beautiful building, this marble gold-gilded building, just like the gilding on this building, democracy is merely a facade without economic equality. And to paraphrase Daniel Baldwin, America has an empathy crisis. We do not lack the money, the means, or the resources. We lack the empathy and the will. We need equal and accessible health care. We need universal housing and education. That is the only way we will ever gain that economic equality, by having equal access to the tools we need to raise up out of the poverty we are in. Moving forward, the inhumanity that is suffered upon the homeless population from Denver to Portland to Washington, D.C. is something that is never covered, because there is no oversight of it and there is no record of it. An experience I had when I was homeless, I was staying at the Crossroads Shelter here in Denver, which is ran by the Salvation Army, an allegedly Christian charity. And I got assaulted with my own walker because I was not leaving quick enough. The police came there, they took my report, they came back and told me that I would be charged with assault if I pressed charges. Because as a disabled, handicapped, 120-pound person, apparently I assaulted 2 people twice my size and called the police on myself. That is the level of oversight and disregard that we treat our homeless human population with in the United States of America. And the conditions which these shelters are in is something which the majority of, and yes, I will use this phrase, the majority of white America would literally not allow their puppies to be in. The Crossroads shelter has roaches, rats, mice, exposed wiring above standing water. It has black mold, and it will serve you literally rancid food. And if you want to sleep on something that's raised above that floor, you have to pay to stay in a shelter, a Christian charities shelter, which is tax exempt, which receives hundreds of millions of dollars from all of you every holiday when they're ringing those bells and talking about how good of Christians they are. I do as well. And one thing we need to push forward this economic equality, in addition to access to housing, to healthcare, and education, is access to the internet. Because the internet is the economic lifeblood of the United States and of the modern world. Without the internet, you can't find housing, you can't find doctors, you can't find public resources, you can't find education, and you essentially cannot communicate with anybody. We need public access to internet and Wi-Fi throughout our countries. If we can spend $250 million on one jet to go bomb people who have nothing to eat, we can provide Wi-Fi for the American population. And moving back to the matter of the inhumane, unethical treatment of the homeless population, the denial of public services, whether it is by the police, by first responders, or by emergency services, is inhumane treatment by the definition which we have agreed upon and drafted and signed with the United Nations. I and other members of the homeless population have been denied emergency medical services because of the mere fact that we are homeless. I have had EMTs approach me to render me the emergency services. They asked my address, found out I was homeless, and left me. That happens to people every single day in this city and around this country. So I ask you, if you will educate those around you, if you will educate yourselves, if you will come and continue coming to these events, continue to support this organization, and continue to help us build the resources and the network we need to rise above the inhumanity and bring us all to equality. Thank you for your time, and have a good evening.
All right, so we're going to read a couple of the Poor People's Campaign demands in between each speaker. So we demand the immediate implementation of federal and state living wage laws that are commensurate for the 21st century economy, guaranteed annual incomes, full employment, and the right for all workers to form and join unions. We demand the expansion of Medicaid in every state and the protection of Medicare and single-payer health care for all. We demand relief from crushing household, student, and consumer debt. We demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of our country's urgent needs around decent and affordable housing, free public education, and a robust safety net and Social Security. And we demand the repeal of the 2017 federal tax law and the reinvestment of those funds into public programs for housing, healthcare, education, jobs, infrastructure, and welfare for the poor. Thank you. The next speaker, Ben, tell me your last name again. Ben was a surprise speaker at the last minute, so he's not on our list. Ben Dunning, I'll have you introduce yourself, sir. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Did you know that thousands of people die every year from anti-poor policies? The truth is that a morality that claims to care for the souls of people while destroying their bodies and communities is deeply immoral. My name is Benjamin Dunning, and I am I'm an organizer with Denver Homeless Out Loud. And let's see here. Seems that we kind of unsettled by the sight of our homeless communities. Prepare to be unsettled. It's said that society can be judged by how it treats its poor. I'm here to talk about the criminalization of our homeless community. Last year, the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless reported that 232 homeless folks died out on the street. And this, in a city where it's illegal to cover yourself with a blanket if you lay down on public property. There is even a legal process for taking people's property away from them if they should happen to violate this ordinance. There is currently a class action lawsuit against the city, not because of the city taking people's personal property away who were homeless and on the streets and being swept, but because they did not follow their own procedures in how to do this. In the meantime, the city's been drawing out the process for as long as they possibly can. Sweeping people off the street does not ensure domestic tranquility. It does not promote the general welfare. All it does is cause unnecessary suffering to the poorest among us. You know, our faith communities do a lot to help our homeless communities, but it seems they're only willing to go so far. Did you know that every church building in the city and county of Denver is approved as a shelter year-round for up to 8 people? This is in the building code. You don't have to file any zoning or anything. All you got to do is do it. By building the building as a church, you can do it. According to citydata.com, I didn't have a lot of time to check my resources, so this is a quick check. There's 439 churches in the city and county of Denver. I'm not sure how many own their buildings. But at that rate, if every church took in 3 people, that's 1,300 people that would not have to sleep out on the street. How many of those 232 people that died last year wouldn't have to die because of the elements? The most recent point-in-time study was released earlier this week. 1,308 unsheltered homeless people were counted as a result of that. We may not be able to afford to build fancy housing, but we can keep people from having to suffer out on the streets. We have the resources right now, and we have the moral calling. We just need the will to do so. Continue to prepare to be unsettled. Did you know that it is legal to sleep on private property if you have the permission from the landowner? How many of those churches own their land? Why are our church pristine lawns not littered with homeless folks seeking safe refuge? And that we choose not to. All we need is the will. Folks, the world is watching. Who's not here that should be? Who's not taking on responsibility that should be? Waiting for someone else to do it. Being a fan of this movement does not get the job done. And that's all I have.
Okay, we demand an end to mass incarceration and the continuing inequalities for black, brown, and poor white people within the criminal justice system. We demand equality and the safety of all persons, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. We demand 100% clean, renewable energy and a public jobs program to transition to a green economy that will put millions of people in sustainable living wage jobs. We demand, and this is important for us Coloradans, we demand a ban on fracking, mountaintop removal, coal mining, coal ash ponds, and offshore drilling. We demand a ban on all new pipelines, refineries, coal, oil, and gas export terminals. We demand an end to military aggression and warmongering. And on that note, next up we have a vet to speak, Jake Altinger. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jake. Like Steve said, I'm a veteran. I served 4 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment, joined the Army right out of high school. I grew up poor. Like, my family was always poor. We had a tiny little house in Manitou, like no more than 600 square feet. The foundation sloped in 3 different directions. It was so old, the glass in the windows was warped. And my mom ran a business out of the back room of the house as a seamstress and interior designer so she could be a stay-at-home mom. After the economy tanked after 9/11, she couldn't keep that up. She had to go back to school for nursing. But the point was we didn't really realize how poor we were until we moved to Colorado Springs to finish high school. And then once we're in high school, then everybody starts talking about going to college, and we knew college was really expensive, and Mom was straight up with us that if we ever went, it wasn't going to be on her dime. So there were pretty much 2 options for us. That was scholarships or the military. And so being my mom probably would have rather that I went to college on an ROTC scholarship, became an officer, and got a job in the medical field, something along those lines. But of course I was 17 and full of adrenaline and testosterone, and I knew better. So I enlisted to be an airborne ranger. And she figured, well, at least that's all right. Even if he's enlisting, he'll have the GI Bill to use afterwards. And sure enough, today I'm going to school, and the VA is paying for my education in journalism and political science. And thanks. I often get this funny remark that from other students, and I don't usually say anything back because I know that it generally comes from a place of ignorance, and they don't mean anything by it. But they tell me I'm lucky that I get a free education, and I can tell you that I might not have to be paying anything out of my own pocket right now, but my education wasn't free. I paid for it with 4 years of my life and 3 combat deployments. I paid for it with hungry days, sleepless nights, months of dehumanizing training. I paid for it blowing out my knee, herniating discs in my neck and back. I pay for it every night when I go to sleep and I'm haunted by the sounds of gunshots and explosions, visions of mutilated corpses and the stench of blood and bile. I pay for it every time memories resurface of my brothers that never came back from Afghanistan. And I pay for it with the piece of me that never came back either. They tell me I was serving my country over there, but I fail to see how. Costs of food, housing, healthcare, education keep going up, wages are stagnant, and more good jobs are going overseas. Drug addiction and homelessness, suicide, especially among veterans, is skyrocketing. No one seems to give a shit. At least the government doesn't. We do. And we still have 20 million Americans that don't even have access to basic health care. I know I helped Raytheon, GE, and General Dynamics make billions in defense contracts. I know that I helped Shell, Exxon, and BP steal Iraqi oil, and I know I helped pharmaceutical companies steal Afghan poppy. But nothing I did in the US military helped any of the American people. The US military is not a jobs program. It's not an education plan. It's a death machine. It survives and thrives off of desperation at home and destruction abroad. It extorts, brainwashes, and dehumanizes the poor of America to rape, steal from, and slaughter the poor of the world. And unfortunately, whenever we talk about national security and our military budget, it's always framed as a conversation of national security instead of a conversation about our national priorities. And that's what this campaign is about here today. We're here to reframe the moral narrative. We're here to reset our national priorities. Last year, we spent $668 billion, taxpayer dollars, on our military, and only $190 billion on anti-poverty programs. By 2023, 66 cents of every tax dollar will go to the military-industrial complex, and only 12 cents to anti-poverty programs. 90% of the Senate just voted to increase military spending by $165 billion over 2 years. That money could have given every American a free college education, ended homelessness in the United States, and ended world hunger twice. Dr. Martin Luther King once said that a nation that's spending more money on weapons of warfare than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And by that standard, the United States Congress loudly declares its moral bankruptcy annually with every new budget it passes. Pundits and politicians are quick to ask us how we could afford Social Security, welfare, food stamps, raising the minimum wage, free college tuition, or providing health care for all. Yet every single year, the military budget goes up and up without even the pretense of a public debate. This campaign is about reorganizing our national priorities. Not only is this culture of militarism, imperialism, and warfare and violence bankrupting our actual monetary treasury, it is bankrupting our spiritual and moral treasury. And this campaign is about reorganizing the budget, not just of our finances in this country, but the way we budget our souls, the way we budget our morality, the way we budget, the way we spend our money in every single day, whether we're going to choose to keep buying oil-based products, whether we're going to keep buying guns, whether we're going to donate to the NRA, and all those things. This campaign is demanding a national budget that reflects a new set of national priorities that puts the peace, prosperity, and happiness of the American people over profits. Simple as that. We are demanding an end to U.S. militarism and imperialism around the globe, and we are demanding an end to the militarization of our police and our borders at home. We're demanding an immigration system that treats immigration as a problem of human rights and not as a problem of national security. And we are demanding an end to the economy of death and destruction to switch to an economy of life, liberty, and prosperity. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, next up we have Amalthea Alwyn to speak about ecological devastation.
Hi there. Thank you all for being here today. In 2007, the journal Science published research predicting a permanent dust bowl by 2050 from Kansas to California. If that isn't bad enough, a recent speech at the University of Chicago, James Anderson, professor of atmospheric chemistry at Harvard University, warns that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we end the use of fossil fuels by 2024. If we do not end the massive predatory corporate assault on Colorado and our world, our children will not live out their full lives. You and I will die of famine, drought, fire, diseases like Lyme, floods, and full-scale wars, leading up to ecosystem collapse, triggering the end of the human experiment. I know this is true because I live it. I have almost lost my life several times to Lyme disease, the first major epidemic of a warming planet. So I am acutely aware that our question today is whether short-term profit by a few or the continuation of the species' access to food and water and justice are more valuable. We are part of our Mother Earth and exist at her mercy. It is time to stop denying the fundamental right of all people to a chance at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We, the people of Colorado, demand 100% clean, renewable energy and a just employment transition to a green economy. We demand fully funded, publicly controlled water and sanitation infrastructure, prioritizing impacted, poor, rural, and Native communities. We demand a ban on fracking and all oil and gas and coal development and infrastructure. We accept no more sacrifices of lives like mine and the children with fracking wells next to their playgrounds. We accept no more home explosions. We accept no more extractive financial harm that leaves us to clean up spills, fires, benzene leaks, and more after these corporations declare bankruptcy and leave us with the problem. We will accept no more economic destruction of families through medical disasters created by greedy industries calculating acceptable death tolls. We will accept no more homes and farms unable to afford water. We accept no more sacrifice zones of communities of color. They hope that you and I do not understand that we are all fighting for the same thing. What we are fighting for now is our very existence, our right to love and survive and thrive. My Lyme disease, your mass incarceration, our lack of a living wage, children in cages, racism, environmental devastation, military destructiveness, and many other harms are all one thing. We are one people under greedy violence with liberty and justice for none, or we are one people diversely beautiful with liberty and justice for all. Lyme disease and the other destructive forces that I have survived have taught me that we do not know our real strength until everything is taken from us, and yet still we rise. When faced with the impossible, we warriors refuse to go quietly into that dark night. So I stand here today, and with every day that I have left, defiant in the face of overwhelming harm, determined to build the intersectional army of warrior survivors who know that impossible odds aren't impossible because we've defied them. I stand here with every one of you willing to rise to the challenge of our birth in this time. My past has taught me that there is no purpose to being defined by fear or defeat. There is only the courage to stand anyway, to fight on, and to do the impossible simply because it must be done. Step into your courage. We are the hope of every human being, and it's time for you and I to rise. Thank you all for being here, and if anyone has not yet signed the Fracking Setbacks Initiative, I have copies so that we can protect some of those children from being exploded by fracking near their schools. Thank you.
So folks, we had this thing planned to run till 6. We thought we had it dialed in. We were way wrong. I hope you'll bear with us because every speaker we have here has something powerful to say. Next up, we've got Dr. Jennifer Leith.
This evening I have a question for each of you. I have a question for all of us. Do we have the heart for a revival of the Poor People's Campaign? Do we have the heart for a revival of the Poor People's Campaign?
Yeah.
Do we have the heart?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we have the heart
Yeah.
for the revival of the Poor People's Campaign? The concerns of the Poor People's Campaign are clear. In fact, many of these concerns have been in focus for the past 50 years. We are in a crisis of poverty and inequality that impacts almost half of all the people who live on this Turtle Island. We indeed are in a crisis of systemic racism. We are in a crisis of ecological devastation. The crisis is urgent. We are in a crisis of war economy and militarism. Our crisis, though, is a crisis of our hearts. It's a crisis of lies, greed, and fears that drive a national immorality. Hateful, unholy, bigoted, biblical interpretation is the order of the day in Jeff Sessions' mouth. Lies about what the Bible says and what it means makes our lives difficult. Makes it appear that racism and classism and heterosexism and ableism and all the other isms are okay. But they're not okay. While we know all of these things, the question with which I began must be asked again. Do we have a heart for this campaign? Do you have the heart? Do I have the heart? We can talk all day about our concerns and demands, but our talk is cheap and our words mean nothing if we do not have the heart for transformative work that needs to be done. As a part of the religious community of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, where we marked 3 years since the violent, bigoted massacre of 9 people at Mother Emanuel. As a pastor within this denomination, as a member of the faculty of the Iliff School of Theology, where students are financially strapped to try to acquire the skills that they need to do the intellectual and spiritual work of leading a new moral way of life. As a queer woman myself, I ask each of you to check your heart. Today, I'm checking my heart. Will you check your heart? If you'll check your heart, say, I'm checking. I'm checking. Check your heart. Will your heart reject gerrymandering laws, tax cuts for the rich? Check your heart. Will your heart refuse to ignore the cries of indigenous people denied all kinds of civil rights? Brown families separated from one another. Black people shot and caged without recourse. Check your heart. Will your heart expand to understand human existence as but one part of a global and universal ecology, a part that can be satisfied with abundance when we stop hoarding resources? Check your heart. Will your heart expand to love, peace of mind, body, and soul for all people, individuals, communities, and regions? Check your heart. Will your heart beat for love, justice, and inclusive community? Will your heart celebrate the sacred connection we must make between our ancestors and our descendants? Check your heart. Do you have the heart for this campaign? Do you have the heart? Once you checked your heart, then join me in turning the question out to the world in which we live. In a statement, in a demand, in a requirement. Have a heart. Have a heart. Have a heart. Love the least of these. Have a heart. Love those who are in cages called prisons. Have a heart. Love those who are coming back from fighting unjust wars. Have a heart. Do what is right for those who are in need. Have a heart.
Okay, next speaker, we have Tay Anderson. Tay, come on up.
How are y'all doing today? Okay. That sounded very boring. How are y'all doing today? I can't hear the people that are relaxing in the shade in the grass. How are y'all doing back there? Cool. I want to start off with a quote from Maya Angelou from her poem, Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. And then she continues to go on and say, Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, and I am the dream, the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. The reason why I share that with you is because right now we are in a turning point in our history where we have to rise up as an American people. We have to first acknowledge that when we are talking about separating children from their families, we have to acknowledge in our history that we are standing on stolen land. So when we tell them they do not belong here, and the administration say you cannot be here, we need to turn to that administration and say you do not belong here either. When we have Democratic mayors like Mayor Michael B. Hancock that stands and says it is okay to kick people out and criminalize them for simply wanting to have a place to sleep, we need to tell him, you are wrong, sir. It doesn't matter if you have a D or an R behind your name. If you cannot stand up for what is right, we will call you out and we will let you know that enough is enough. We have so many people wanting to run for office now. It's like they're everywhere. Whenever there's a rally, they're there. But they weren't here. Some of them weren't here tonight. And so I want you to take note of that, of who shows up and who shows out when it's time to make real change. Because everybody wants to be here when they need a vote. But when they get your vote, they disappear. And so now it's time to hold those who want to be elected into office and those who are already in office accountable. It doesn't matter about a party affiliation. If you can't put people over party, you are wrong. And so we have to stand up, especially as young people. And we have to continue to get out there to implore other voters to get out there to vote for politicians that will show up for things just like this. We have to vote for the change that we want to see, or we would be out here every single weekend and we would continue to say the same thing over and over and over again when our power lies in the ballot box. And as young people, we have to be able to stand up and say that we will not be pushed over any longer. We are about to inherit a country where we are being forced to accept what is going on. The president introduced today a space force. Instead of keep putting money and devoting resources to children that are being ripped apart from their families, he wants to devote a space force where we're going to go fight nothing. Absolutely nothing. Meteorites? Are we going to look at the moon? When we need to be able to make sure these children stay together. We have students right here in this city that are in homeless shelters that have holes in their clothes. We can be doing something about that. We have students here in Denver that are not even being able to give a sufficient meal and not even able to get a world-class education. We can fix that. But it starts with each and every one of you. So it doesn't matter who you vote for, what party you're affiliated with. It matters that you stand up for what is right. And so I need you to make a pledge today. And that is to continue to tell yourself that no matter what's going on in this country, that you will continue to rise for the students and the children that are being separated from their mothers and fathers on the southern border. That you will continue to rise against hate every time it comes to our front door, like policies like the urban camping ban. That you will continue to rise and you will make sure that we are standing up and telling governors that want to continue to frack our entire state out that enough is enough. And that you need to rise and tell everybody in one voice that you will vote and that we will unelect those who are enacting these racist bigotry policies that continue to hurt everybody. And if you are willing to fight for me, I am willing to stand and fight with you. We can't do this alone, especially as young people. We need your support. I rise, you rise, we all rise. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Jeff Smith from the Democratic Socialists of America. Jeff, come on up. Denver.
Thanks a lot. All right, hey everyone. My name is Jeff, and I'm a member of the Denver chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, also known as the DSA. Yeah! Right on. So I'm really happy that the Poor People's Campaign is being resurrected and that DSA is involved both on a national level and now here on a local level. This is fantastic stuff. So we're here to talk about poverty, which itself has existed, before capitalism. But under our current economic arrangement, poverty has been weaponized as a form of social domination. And the trick is that the powerful like to push the blame on our domination to our own conditions. That we're lazy, that we don't want to have better lives, or that we're somehow undeserving of a life of dignity. I think that's BS. I'd like to focus today on how poverty is both preventable in our post-scarcity society and also give a few examples on what we could change immediately to drastically reduce our poverty. So first, let's talk about who has that wealth and why. The wealthy and the powerful may tell us that they deserve their wealth, that they created it themselves. However, all wealth is created by workers like you and me. Business owners and corporations hire us to work, pay us a wage for our labor, and pocket the profits. That profit is our exploitation. We as workers must labor to afford the necessities of life: housing, food, healthcare, and provide for our families. Put simply, we must work or starve. And those necessities are sold to us as commodities from other companies at a profit. Now, these business owners may tell you that they built these firms themselves, but actually, 80% of all wealth today comes through inheritance. And if you trace it back, that was all stolen. So, most wealth is held by those who were lucky enough to be born into it, and is perpetuated by our own exploitation. They make money because we are excluded from the profits we produce. Average people are left squandering their lives and in a state of wage slavery and debt peonage. Furthermore, the decimation of the labor movement and increases in automation since '73 have seen compensation wages grow only 9%, while our productivity has grown by 72%. I wish I got paid 8 times what I make today. I wish you did too. So we exist in a state of hyper-exploitation, unseen in the last half century. So how do we break that cycle? Well, there are a few things in place, but our social safety net is pretty threadbare. We've got some tax refunds from the state that can spur in consumption, I guess. We've got some food stamps and SNAP, which is fantastic. It could be improved. We've got some public housing, but it's in terrible disarray. We've got some public education, which is under attack, and some environmental protections that keep us from dying, but they won't stop us from fracking in our schools, and many other things. However, billions of dollars in profits that we produce that we could use for other means are left to corporations and their shareholders to use for leisure and to reinvest in the domination of our political system. In order to change this cycle, we must democratically take back the state, this one, all the other ones across the country, and the one in DC, and reform the system and destroy all the corruption within it. Additionally, we must take action outside of the state through a new labor movement. That wealth that we created in the big business, that the big businesses hold on for us, should be taxed at a greater rate and invested into further development of our public programs and introduce greater protections for the rights of the working class people. So that would include growing the safety net for all people, guaranteed housing, guaranteed food, a right to rest for a homeless population until we can build more housing for them. Single-payer health care. I like Medicare for all, but whatever flavor you like, as long as everyone's getting health care. We could reverse the privatization process, so a moratorium on charter schools, forgiveness of all debts, especially medical, student, and home debts, and maybe even using eminent domain on patent rights to get cheap pharmaceuticals and ending the corporate welfare. And then we can also work to destroy the co-option of the state. So this is reforming our elections. So that's campaign finance reform, end to gerrymandering. Ideally abolishing the two-party system so you don't have to hold your nose and vote for the lesser of two evils. So, and then we can also improve conditions for compensation. And most of this is by protecting and enshrining the right to unionize, increasing our minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, ending the wage gap, and many other things. So in a sense, what I'm arguing for is democratic control of the economy and the means of survival. But these are just a few suggestions. Thanks. Those are just a few suggestions, and those policies shouldn't be decided by me. I just threw these out. It's up to all of us. So here are my closing remarks. If you're interested in what you can do today, I insist that you get involved with the Poor People's Campaign as it ramps up, and of course, join DSA. We're concerned with all of these issues on a daily basis, and we're out on the streets, we're out in county assemblies, we're changing things. Come with us. So finally, people ask how we're going to pay for it, and it's been demonstrated that the money is sitting around. We also have all those billionaires holding our money for us.
Okay, Derek Blanton is our next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks for having me today. It's really great to speak to you all. I moved to this city as a poor person. I came here with $600, and since then I've never really gotten past that. I've worked in restaurants in this city. No matter how much I worked or how little I worked, it really couldn't compete with the fact that my rent usually takes about 60% of my income. And we have a lot of politicians that run on the idea of affordable housing. But affordable housing is only a subsidy for shitty wages. And until we have people who are going to help unionize our workforce, until we have people who insist our business leaders pay a living wage, we'll never make progress. And affordable housing is just a token. I'm really glad I got to follow Jeff. I really agree with him. I just would like to point out that this is a disparity by design. So with that, I'm going to share some words by somebody, by Tim McElrath, a poem, a song called Disparity by Design. All the way from these barrels, I'm sorry. A little nervous. All the way from the bottom of these barrels we've cried out, so ashamed of our tears that we blamed only ourselves. And that's when they win. They keep us convinced to lift up our chins because the playing fields are level and we've all had a chance. And with that, they dismiss the fast lanes they rode, which access depends on who you know or where you come from, or whose daughter are you, or whose fortunate son. And with that, they tell us to stick out our thumbs while they feast on the Lenins and we settle for crumbs. So is that their overreaching arm, or is it compassion? Is that a handout undeserved, or is it a just reparation? All the way in their towers, high above these glass ceiling tombs, they tell themselves they've earned this by working hard and playing by the rules. But this is only part true. It is a dangerous trick played on me and you because, like a practical joke, we pulled on our bootstraps so hard that they broke. So is that their overreaching arm, or is it compassion? Is that their handout undeserved, or is it a just reparation? Like a single domino that falls while the rest stay vertical, we have been fed empty fairy tales. And will you believe them? If there's a God, they better pray that this sleeping giant never wakes. Because if we just take a step back, a bigger picture we might view, that perhaps the man in the gutter is not so different from you. So come in, out of the cold, and forget all that you know, because there's always been room by the fire for you. Come in out of the cold. Or what? Or will you believe them? Will you believe their overreaching arm? Will you believe their compassion? It's a just reparation. I will no longer stand vertical. I will be the single domino that falls. We should not believe them. Stick together. Solidarity forever. Thank you for being here. I love you all.
Last but definitely not least, Reverend Jessica Abel. Thank you.
Wow, thank you guys for sticking around in my world. I mean, you guys are the ones who stay to the end of the postlude and the end of the organ thing, and the last person has cleaned up the last dish. Wow, thank you so much for being here. I I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I've lived here for 5 years this last time, nearly 3 years the last time. I can't seem to get away from Denver. But growing up in Memphis and bringing that sensibility and that knowledge of what it means to be the place where we kill the prophets makes me really aware of how dangerous it is to start talking about this stuff. And made me sort of shake my head when we didn't have much of a manifestation of the Poor People's Campaign here in Denver. We were all tapped out, and could we really add one more thing? And really, I mean, do you know we're having a primary in 9 days, people? 9 days? There are ballot initiatives that we care about, but here's the thing. Especially coming from somebody who looks like me, that is how change is stopped. That is how nothing ever happens. That is how the slow morality of our country is degraded into it being acceptable behavior to buy 17 kinds of water at 7-Eleven while 13.8 million households in this country cannot afford water, right? We have accepted obscenities that have become normal life because we're all too busy and we all have really important things we're doing. None of that is false, by the way. I mean, I have seen so many of you at so many of the things that we do in which we stand and we speak for something different. So I know this is not caring. It's often a lack of connection, the hopelessness and the helplessness that pervades our work is overwhelming sometimes. I do ecological work. I work for Green Faith. I'm the Colorado organizer. And all the time I talk about our connection with the planet and why it matters. I represent interfaith communities dedicated to slow movement building, and it can be incredibly painful because I'll tell you something that often only people just like me will tell you, the really bad news. I used to be a hospital chaplain. This gets to be part of your life. It is too late to stop global warming. It is too late to stop the ecological devastation. Our choices now are adapt, change, renew, revive. It is too late to go back. The tipping point is behind us. The reality of ecological devastation is that as our storms become more devastating and as the ice is broken up around the Arctic in the name of shipping, the people who bear the greatest burden of this ecological devastation are the poor. 100%, no question, hands down, globally, nationally, statewide, here in Denver, here in Capitol Hill, probably within a 600-yard radius. The people who are most devastated by our lack of access to water and air and open space, to our disconnection from the rhythms of nature and creation, and to our loss of what it means to be bound as part of creation together, devastates the poor more than anyone else. They bear the burden more than anyone else. And that, I believe, is our common connection, and not the source of despair, but actually the source of hope. I'm incredibly glad to meet other progressive people of faith all the time, but frankly, there's common ground to be found in all houses of worship or houses of non-worship, or we're going to sit around and go to, I don't know, somewhere in Boulder where we meditate into a different brain pattern, it doesn't matter how you seek your relationship with each other and with the divine. This work is part of our call. So clearly, we're ignoring God and God's very clear edict to care for the alien, the stranger, the widow, to care for creation and to be stewards thereof. We pretty much ignored Jesus and the whole visit the prisoner thing and the whole feed the hungry and all of that, and the use of creation as a metaphor of new life. And so I'm asking that perhaps we allow ourselves to be open to a movement of the Spirit, of a moral revival that lets us make these connections between our everyday actions and how the world can be healed. To what we choose to buy in 7-Eleven, to how much access people with no resources have to water. Our actions matter. Our decisions matter. Your staying here for an hour and a half matters, because we're in this together. This is the dangerous work. Talking about upending the structures of oppression, making the demands that the Poor People's Campaign is making now and made 50 years ago, that is what got Dr. King killed. It's what got Jesus killed. I mean, the week of his last week was the upturning of the tables, right? We don't deal very well with this kind of upending and this kind of upheaval. But I believe that we can hold each other in this work, that we need not be swept away by a deluge, but instead be bound together as common members of this community. I believe that we can say we are a different kind of people, and we intend to live differently. We intend to live differently on the planet, and we intend to live differently with each other. Look to the demands of the Poor People's Campaign. Sign up and get our information. We plan on causing some trouble. We plan on disrupting and agitating a wee bit. We plan on using some of our favorite models of nonviolent, direct action to change the world around us. We are the hands and feet of God, as we say in my world. There is no one else but us to do the work. So join us. Thank you for being here.
You'll end now with one more song.
I want to thank you all again for sticking around this long. And be sure, hopefully we got everybody with the pledge cards. If you filled it out, you can just bring it over here to the side of the stage and we'll get that for you. Thank you to all the organizers. This is Eric McEwen and Jennifer Ward, and again, I am Beth Leba. We are part of a small group that is attempting to start a POC-centered Unitarian Universalist congregation here in Denver, and we like to sing, so.
And this is a song from the 1968 movement with a little bit of a hip-hop update for 2018. The song says, everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. And then the little updated part goes, I'll say, everybody's got a right to live, and you say to live. Everybody's got a right to dream.
To dream.
Everybody's got a right to love.
To love.
Everybody's got a right to learn.
To learn.
All right, that's how it'll go. Here's the main part. Thanks for sticking around. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live.
To live.
Everybody's got a right to dream.
To dream.
Everybody's got a right to love.
To love.
Everybody's got a right to learn.
To learn.
Everybody's got a right to rest.
To rest.
Everybody's got a right to eat.
To
Everybody's got a right to live.
To live.
Everybody's got a right to. Here we go now. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Once more now. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live.
Thank you all again, and please join us and keep this movement going.
Like I said earlier, anybody that wants to connect with any of us organizers, feel free to come on up.
So I used Marcus's phone and I caught it. Do you want to do a quick reflection? There's where you still got your knife. Can you hold this for a second for me? And I guess I should probably turn on the live feed.
We need an umbrella to go over that.